The teacup had cooled enough to be touched, which was how Mrs. Elspeth Crowley knew something was wrong. She had been standing in her own sitting room for several minutes, holding her handbag in both hands with a care usually reserved for infants and glassware. The chair opposite her remained occupied, though its occupant had stopped participating in the arrangement. Steam no longer rose from the cup on the saucer beside the chair. That was the detail that stayed with her. In the village of Hatherley Green, unfinished tea was a discourtesy bordering on the alarming. Mrs. Crowley did not scream. She did not rush forward. She had been raised, like most people in the village, to give events the chance to explain themselves before reacting. She said quite clearly, "Mr. Bellamy," and waited. Nothing answered. She took one step closer and saw that Arthur Bellamy's mouth was open in a way that suggested he had been about to speak, or perhaps had already tried and found the effort unrewarding. His eyes were directed at the mantelpiece, where the clock had stopped at 3:20 several years earlier, and no one had felt compelled to correct it. Mrs. Crowley placed her handbag on the sideboard and adjusted the lace runner beneath it. Then she touched the back of Arthur Bellamy's hand. It was cool, not cold, but unmistakably finished. "I see," she said, though there was no one to hear her. The afternoon continued without enthusiasm. Outside, the church bell marked the quarter hour with its usual apologetic tone. Somewhere along the lane, a car door closed. None of this altered the fact that Arthur Bellamy, retired chemist, amateur gardener, and persistent letter writer to the parish council, was dead in her sitting room with his tea only half consumed. Mrs. Crowley rang for the doctor first. She would later say this was instinct, though in truth it was habit. One rang for the doctor when something went wrong with a body. The police were for matters of intent, and intent, she felt, required a little more certainty. Dr. Fenwick arrived within 12 minutes, having abandoned a cup of his own at the surgery. He took off his hat, examined Arthur Bellamy with quiet efficiency, and frowned not with shock, but with professional dissatisfaction. "He's been gone perhaps 15 minutes, he said. "No sign of distress beforehand?" Mrs. Crowley shook her head. "We were discussing the Rose Show." Dr. Fenwick closed Arthur's eyes with 2 fingers. "I see." He did not, but it was the correct response. The word poison was not spoken until later, and even then only in careful increments. Dr. Fenwick said, "Unlikely to be natural," which Mrs. Crowley interpreted as improper. When the police were called, they arrived in the form of 2 constables who stood awkwardly near the door, as though the carpet might object to them. By the time Inspector Purbright arrived, the tea had been removed, the sitting room aired, and Mrs. Crowley had changed into something darker. Inspector Purbright was not a tall man, nor an imposing one. He carried his hat under his arm as if it were a document he might need again. He looked at the chair, the table, the space where the cup had been. "May I?" he asked, already stepping inside. Mrs. Crowley nodded. "Of course." He did not examine the body first. He looked instead at the room, at the careful order of objects that had known each other for years. The books were aligned by height rather than subject. The fireplace had been cleaned recently, but not enthusiastically. A vase of daffodils leaned slightly to the left, as though sharing a private opinion. "You were expecting him," the inspector said. "Yes, 3 o'clock, and he arrived 2 minutes early. He always did that, said it gave him moral advantage." Inspector Purbright smiled faintly. "Did it?" "No," Mrs. Crowley said. "I always kept him waiting anyway." The inspector turned at last to Arthur Bellamy. His expression changed only slightly, acquiring a mild air of apology, as though interrupting someone mid-thought. "He was in good health?" He said he was. Inspector Purbright nodded. "People do." There was a pause, polite and heavy. Outside, the car door closed again, this time with more purpose. "You serve tea," he said. "Yes." "Did you drink?" "No. I prefer mine after visitors leave. It tastes more like myself." Inspector Purbright considered this. "And Mr. Bellamy drank his?" "Some of it." "Did he remark on it?" "No. Did you?" Miss Crowley frowned. "I beg your pardon. Did you say anything about the tea?" She thought carefully. "I asked if it was hot enough. And was it?" "Yes." Inspector Purbright nodded again, as though this settled nothing at all. He walked to the mantelpiece and glanced at the stopped clock. "Do you know the time?" Mrs. Crowley hesitated. I noticed it was 3:30 when I touched his hand. That was the first thing you did? Yes. And you are certain of the time? Quite. Inspector Purbright made a note. Certainty is useful, he said, not looking at her. Even when it's wrong. Mrs. Crowley stiffened, but said nothing. The inspector returned to the chair. He crouched slightly, not close enough to intrude, but near enough to suggest acquaintance. Mr. Bellamy was not unliked, he said. No, Mrs. Crowley replied, but he was thorough. Yes, the inspector said. That can have consequences. He straightened, placed his hat back on his head, and glanced around once more, as if the room might add something now that the formalities were nearly done. Mrs. Crowley, he said gently, this afternoon will become less private than you might wish. She nodded. I supposed it would. For now, he added, I suggest you make another cup of tea. Drink it. She looked at him, surprised. It helps, Inspector Purbright said. People think more clearly when they do what they normally would have done. Mrs. Crowley moved toward the kitchen. At the doorway she paused. Inspector? Yes? The tea he drank, she said. It was from a fresh pot. Inspector Purbright smiled again, very slightly. I'm glad you told me, he said. The lawn behind Mrs. Crowley's house had always been considered reliable. It sloped gently toward the hedge, neither ambitious nor neglected, and its grass bore the patient resilience of something often discussed and rarely altered. On that afternoon it had acquired a small audience. Inspector Purbright stood near the edge of it with his hands loosely clasped behind his back, his posture suggesting leisure rather than scrutiny. He had learned early in his career that people spoke more freely when they believed nothing official was taking place. The constables remained nearer the house, politely pretending to examine the downpipe. The first to speak was Mrs. Dalrymple from next door, who had arrived with the speed of someone long accustomed to arriving early at scenes she was not invited to. She gestured at the grass with a firm thumb. I said at the time it was too closely cut, she announced. Inspector Purbright inclined his head. At what time was that? Last summer, or possibly the one before. Ah, it weakens the roots, she continued. Everything looks tidy until it doesn't. Inspector Purbright smiled faintly, as if the lawn had personally offended her. Across the grass, Mr. Lionel Graves leaned on his walking stick and shook his head. Rubbish. Arthur liked it neat, said it showed discipline. He also liked chrysanthemums in June, Mrs. Dalrymple retorted. We all indulged him. The inspector made a note, though not about the lawn. He was watching how easily Arthur Bellamy's name moved between them, acquiring different tones without resistance. Dead, Arthur had already become communal property. Mrs. Crowley stood slightly apart, her arms folded, observing with the reserved attentiveness of someone whose house had become briefly public. She said nothing, which was noted. Inspector Purbright stepped forward, his shoe sinking slightly into the grass. Mr. Bellamy came through here? Yes, Mrs. Crowley said. He always preferred the back, said it saved time. Did it? No. The inspector nodded again as though reassured. From the hedge came a small cough. Miss Harriet Lowe emerged, adjusting her scarf with unnecessary precision. I saw him arrive, she said, as if this had been waiting politely for acknowledgement. At what time? The inspector asked. Just before 3. Mrs. Crowley's mouth tightened. He arrived at 2:58. Miss Lowe smiled. So he did. That's what I meant. Inspector Purbright, let the discrepancy rest between them. And he appeared. Perfectly himself, Miss Lowe said. He waved. I thought he looked rather pleased. About what? She hesitated. About something. Mr. Graves snorted. Arthur was always pleased about something, usually his own correctness. That's not fair, Miss Dalrymple said. He was also pleased when other people were wrong. The inspector turned slightly, adjusting his stance. Mr. Bellamy did not bring anything with him. Mrs. Crowley answered. Just his notebook. He carried it everywhere, and he wrote in it. Yes, before tea. I don't know. You didn't notice. I was making the tea. Inspector Purbright made another note. He looked again at the grass, then at the hedge. Anyone else see him? A pause. Then Mrs. Dalrymple said. Mrs. Fenwick passed through. She did not stop, Mr. Graves added. She never stops, But she saw him, Mrs. Dalrymple insisted. Inspector Purbright considered this. Did she remark on anything? No, Mrs. Dalrymple said, which is remarkable in itself. There was a murmur of agreement. The inspector glanced toward the house. Mrs. Crowley, did Mr. Bellamy seem unwell? No. Did he complain? Arthur complained constantly, none of it about himself. Inspector Purbright allowed himself a small appreciative pause. And the tea? You prepared it yourself? Yes. Milk first or last? Mrs. Crowley looked at him sharply. Last. I'm not an anarchist. He smiled more openly this time. Of course, Miss Lowe cleared her throat. Arthur was sensitive to taste. How so? The inspector asked. He could always tell if something was different. Mrs. Dalrymple sniffed. He imagined he could. Inspector Purbright raised a hand slightly, forestalling escalation. Did he remark that day? No, Miss Lowe admitted. But he hadn't finished. The phrase hung there, heavier than intended. A breeze moved across the lawn, disturbing nothing but opinions. Inspector Purbright closed his notebook. Thank you, he said mildly. You've all been most helpful. They looked pleased, uncertain and slightly cheated, as though something had ended before it properly began. As they dispersed, Mrs. Crowley remained. She watched the inspector, her expression composed but attentive. You don't believe it was sudden, she said. Inspector Purbright met her gaze. I believe it was brief. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed. It rarely is. She glanced back at the lawn, now empty. Arthur liked to be observed. Yes, the inspector said softly. And today he was. They stood there a moment longer, the grass returning to its ordinary silence, as if it had said all it intended to say for now. Inspector Purbright did not hurry the dispersal. He allowed the neighbors to drift away under their own politeness, carrying conclusions like parcels they had not been asked to hold. Mrs. Crowley accompanied him back into the house, closing the door with a care that suggested it might overhear them. The sitting room looked smaller now, as rooms do once an event has finished using them. A second cup of tea waited on the tray, untouched. Mrs. Crowley gestured to it, then sat, folding her hands. You wished me to drink, she said. In time, the inspector replied. First, I'd like to hear how Mr. Bellamy spoke. She considered this. He spoke clearly, at length, about the parish accounts, the rose show, the library roof, matters that require improvement but not urgency. Anything urgent at all? No. Inspector Purbright walked to the window and looked out at the lawn, now restored to neutrality. Did he argue? Not with me. Arthur saved argument for people who enjoyed it. And did you? She allowed a thin smile. Only when necessary. He turned. Was it necessary that afternoon? Mrs. Crowley paused. No. Silence settled, civil and deliberate. The inspector let it remain. He had found that silences, when treated politely, often forgot their manners. When did you last see him alive? He asked. When he lifted the cup, and his manner then, attentive. He was listening. To you? No. To something he had decided already. Inspector Purbright nodded. Did he receive any letters recently? Yes. Several. From whom? She hesitated. Various people. Anyone in particular? He was corresponding with the vicar. Boundaries? The inspector raised an eyebrow. Those can be troublesome. They were, Mrs. Crowley said. Arthur disliked uncertainty, and the vicar disliked Arthur. A note was made. Outside, a car passed slowly, as though considering stopping and thinking better of it. Did Mr. Bellamy bring anything unusual? The inspector asked. Only his notebook. May I see it? It's not here. Where is it? With him. The constables took it. Did you see him write? No. Did he read anything? Only what he already knew. Inspector Purbright smiled faintly at that, then grew serious. Mrs. Crowley, people rarely die without leaving some small discourtesy behind. I'm looking for it. She met his gaze steadily. Arthur was discourteous often. Choose one, she thought. He corrected me. About the time. The inspector's pen paused. In what way? He said my clock was wrong. And was it? Yes. When? Always. And yet he corrected you that afternoon? Yes. Inspector Purbright closed his notebook. Thank you, she frowned. That seems insufficient. It often does. He moved toward the tray and lifted the cup, sniffing gently. "You didn't drink." "No, please do." She hesitated, then lifted it, taking a careful sip. "It's fine," she said. He set the cup down. "Fine things can be misleading." Mrs. Crowley straightened. "Inspector, are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting nothing," he said mildly. "I'm listening." Another silence followed, this one less comfortable. From the kitchen came the sound of a clock that did keep time. "There will be talk," she said. "Yes, and assumptions, yes." She looked at the chair where Arthur Bellamy had sat. He would have enjoyed that. Inspector Purbright considered the empty space. He still might. A knock sounded at the door, firm but restrained. One of the constables entered, holding a small envelope between two fingers. "Found this in Mr. Bellamy's coat," he said. "Addressed to Mrs. Crowley, unopened." The inspector took it, weighing nothing. "Thank you." He did not hand it over. He looked at Mrs. Crowley instead. "Would you like to open it?" he asked. She hesitated. "Should I?" He smiled, polite as ever. "That depends on whether silence would be more civil." She reached for the envelope. She paused with it between her fingers, feeling the thin resistance of paper meant to be temporary. Inspector Purbright waited, his attention fixed not on her hands but on her face, as though the decision would register there first. Outside, voices drifted past the house, lowered but unmistakably curious, rehearsing sympathy in advance. Mrs. Crowley broke the seal carefully. Inside was a single sheet, folded twice. She read without expression, then again more slowly. The inspector said nothing. When she finished, she did not offer it to him. She placed it on the table, smoothing it flat. "He wanted an answer," she said. "He always did." Purbright inclined his head, accepting the information without pressing for its contents. He had learned that people revealed more by choosing what not to explain. "And you had one?" he asked. "I was considering it," she replied. The clock in the kitchen marked another minute, accurately and without comment. The inspector glanced toward the doorway, then back at her. "Consideration," he said, "can be mistaken for delay." Mrs. Crowley's mouth tightened. "Or for mercy." He acknowledged that with a small movement. Beyond the window, the lawn lay untroubled, its opinions spent for the moment. Somewhere a door closed, decisively. Inspector Purbright took up his hat. "We will speak again," he said. She nodded, folding the letter once more as though restoring it to usefulness. He stepped toward the hall, leaving behind a room that held its breath, the afternoon settling back into itself. Nothing resolved, everything quietly rearranged, as the village prepared to remember this day in several different ways at once again. By early evening, the parish had adjusted its posture. Hatherley Green did not panic, nor did it grieve in any unified way. Instead, it noticed. Curtains were drawn with slightly altered timing. Gates were closed more carefully than usual. People who had not spoken for months found reasons to exchange remarks that began with sympathy and ended with speculation. Inspector Purbright became aware of this shift as he walked from the Crowley house toward the village centre. It was not any single glance or pause but a collective attentiveness, like a body leaning imperceptibly toward a sound it had not yet identified. He acknowledged nods, returned greetings, and accepted the mild inconvenience of being stopped. Mrs. Henley intercepted him near the post box. "Such a shock," she said, as though delivering a message she had memorized. "One never expects these things in the afternoon." "No," the inspector agreed. "Evenings feel more prepared." She smiled uncertainly. "They do. And yet," he added, "afternoons have advantages." Mrs. Henley looked puzzled, then thoughtful. "People are awake," she said. "Yes," Inspector Purbright replied, "and watching." She let him pass, her expression settling into something she would later describe as unease. At the church gate, the vicar stood speaking to Mr. Graves, their heads inclined toward one another with practiced civility. The inspector paused, waiting for an opening that did not come. Eventually the vicar turned, his smile arriving a moment after his eyes. "Inspector," he said warmly, "a distressing business." "It is," Purbright replied. "I understand you and Mr. Bellamy were in correspondence." The vicar's smile tightened slightly. "We were, about parish boundaries." "Yes, and parish responsibilities." "Also yes." Mr. Graves cleared his throat. Arthur had strong views. "So I gather," the inspector said. The vicar folded his hands. He was thorough. Inspector Purbright returned the word without emphasis. "Did he mention visiting Mrs. Crowley today?" "No." "Did you expect him?" "No." "And did you see him?" The vicar hesitated. "Not directly." Mr. Graves shifted. "I did," he said. "From the lane." "At what time?" the inspector asked. "Just after 3. The vicar glanced at him. "Was it?" "Yes." Inspector Purbright did not correct either of them. "Did he appear well?" "Perfectly," Mr. Graves said, "though he was walking rather briskly." "As if pressed?" the inspector asked. "No," the vicar said quickly, "as if resolved." The inspector nodded. "Those can look similar." From the church porch, Mrs. Dalrymple emerged, holding a folded notice. "They're already talking about postponing the fete," she said, as if death were contagious. The vicar sighed. "We must be sensitive. We must be sensible," Mrs. Dalrymple countered. "People will talk regardless." Inspector Purbright observed the exchange with interest. "What are they saying?" he asked. Mrs. Dalrymple pursed her lips. "That Arthur was poisoned. And why do they think that? Because he didn't finish his tea." The inspector allowed himself a brief pause. "That seems specific." Mrs. Dalrymple nodded. "People like details. They make things feel earned. And who suggested it?" She hesitated. "Mrs. Fenwick mentioned it." "Did she?" "Yes." She said the doctor looked troubled. Inspector Purbright made a note. Doctors often do. He excused himself and continued toward the green, where a small cluster had formed near the bench. Miss Lowe sat there, hands folded, her expression attentive. When she saw the inspector, she rose. "They're saying it was deliberate," she said without preamble. "Who is?" he asked. "Everyone." "And what do you think?" "I think Arthur upset people." "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "But it's adjacent." "Did he upset you?" she considered. "He corrected me." The inspector smiled faintly. "He seems to have had a talent for that." "Yes," Miss Lowe said. "But today he seemed satisfied." "In what way?" "As if something had been settled." The inspector glanced back toward the church. "Settlements are rarely quiet." She watched him carefully. "Do you believe it was poison?" "I believe," he said, "that belief is moving faster than fact." She nodded. "It always does." As dusk approached, the bell rang again, its sound carrying farther than usual. Doors closed. Lamps were lit. Conversations shifted indoors, where they would be repeated with greater confidence. Inspector Purbright returned to his car, aware that the parish had already begun its own investigation, one conducted through implication and memory rather than evidence. It would not stop, and it would not wait for him. He sat for a moment before starting the engine, listening to the village settle into its version of events. Somewhere, a conclusion was being rehearsed. He intended eventually to interrupt it. Inspector Purbright returned to the village the following morning under a sky that suggested patience rather than mercy. The night had not cooled opinion, it had organized it. By 9 o'clock, kindness had begun circulating as explanation, and kindness, he knew, was rarely remembered accurately. His first call was at the Fenwick surgery, where the smell of disinfectant competed politely with old paper. Dr. Fenwick looked tired in a way that implied responsibility rather than loss. "You've been busy," the inspector said. "Yes," the doctor replied. "People prefer certainty. And you?" "I prefer caution." Inspector Purbright nodded. "You examined Mr. Bellamy." "I did. And he did not die naturally." "Poison." Dr. Fenwick hesitated. "Likely." "Did you say so?" "I said I was concerned." "To whom?" "My wife." Inspector Purbright raised an eyebrow. "She has a talent for circulation." Dr. Fenwick sighed. "She means well." "So they say." The inspector replied mildly. He thanked the doctor and stepped back into the street, where Mrs. Fenwick herself was already in conversation with 2 others. She smiled brightly on seeing him. "Inspector," she said, "how kind of you to call." "I didn't," he replied pleasantly. "I'm passing." She laughed. "Of course, terrible business, Arthur Bellamy. Such a good man." "In what way?" he asked. She blinked. "Well, he was always helpful." "Can you give me an example?" she thought. "He carried my shopping once." "When?" "Last winter." "Did he?" "Yes." "From the car." "How far?" "Across the lane." Inspector Purbright nodded. "And did you ask him to?" "No, he insisted." Mrs. Dalrymple, who had been listening, interjected. He also corrected her parking. Miss Fenwick waved this away. He meant well, did he? The inspector asked gently. She frowned. Are you suggesting he didn't? I'm suggesting memory can be selective. Mrs. Fenwick stiffened slightly. Arthur was kind. Was he kind? Purbright asked, or was he correct? The question settled uncomfortably. Mrs. Fenwick glanced at Mrs. Dalrymple, then smiled again, though it did not reach her eyes. He meant well, she repeated. Inspector Purbright excused himself and walked toward the green, where Miss Lowe sat feeding crumbs to birds that did not trust her. She looked up as he approached. They say Arthur helped Mrs. Crowley, she said. In what way? They say he was looking out for her. And do you think that's true? Miss Lowe hesitated. He was always looking out for something. That's not the same. No, she agreed. But it sounds better. Who says this? Mrs. Henley. She says Arthur warned Mrs. Crowley about something. About what? About the parish accounts. Inspector Purbright paused. And what did Mrs. Crowley say? She said Arthur was persistent. That's different. Yes, Miss Lowe said, but less flattering. He thanked her and continued on, his attention caught by the bench where Arthur Bellamy had once sat correcting passers-by. Mr. Graves was there now, staring at the ground. You knew him well, the inspector said. Well enough. Was he kind? Mr. Graves snorted. He was thorough. So everyone says. He once helped me with a form, Graves continued. Filled it in for me. That was kind. No, Graves said. It was efficient. He didn't like my handwriting. Inspector Purbright smiled faintly. Did you resent it? No, Graves said after a moment, but I remembered it differently. The inspector let that stand. By midday he found himself back at Mrs. Crowley's door. She admitted him without surprise. They're saying Arthur was helping me, she said, before he spoke. Were you aware of that? No. Did he help you? He advised me about the library roof, the vicar, boundaries. And did you welcome this? I tolerated it. Inspector Purbright nodded. That's often mistaken for gratitude. She looked at him sharply. Are you suggesting I'm ungrateful? I'm suggesting, he said, that kindness, when recalled, often improves. She folded her arms. Arthur believed he was helpful. And you? I believed he was persistent. Did he ever cross a line? She hesitated. He wrote me a letter. I know. He framed it as concern. And was it? She met the inspector's gaze. It was instruction. Silence followed, weighted but not hostile. They're saying he meant well, she added. Yes, Purbright said. They would. She sighed. Arthur liked to be seen as useful, even when he wasn't, especially then. The inspector stood. Kindness, he said thoughtfully, is a generous word. It forgives much, and remembers little, she replied. He smiled, appreciating the alignment. Outside, the village continued its careful retelling, smoothing edges, assigning motives that felt comfortable. Inspector Purbright stepped back into it, aware that somewhere between help and interference, a truth was being quietly misplaced. Inspector Purbright took sugar only when he felt the need to be noticed. It was a habit developed quietly, like most of his habits, and deployed with intention. On that morning he took 2. The cafe on the corner of the green had never pretended to be more than it was. The tables were wiped often but not well, and the owner, Mrs. Ellery, listened with the efficiency of someone who could not afford distraction but disliked ignorance even more. She brought the inspector his tea without asking, set down the sugar bowl and waited. You don't usually, she said. No, he agreed, spooning carefully. But today seemed appropriate. She watched him stir. People are saying things. They usually are. They're saying Arthur Bellamy was poisoned. Yes, and that it was meant kindly. Inspector Purbright smiled faintly. Poison rarely is. She leaned on the counter. Mrs. Fenwick says it must have been a mistake. Someone trying to help him sleep. That's considerate, he said. Did Arthur Bellamy ever mention trouble sleeping? No. He mentioned other people sleeping too much. The inspector tasted the tea. It was overly sweet. He did not grimace. Did you see him yesterday? Yes. He came in around 2:30. Alone? Yes. Did he have tea? No. He said he'd just had some. And did he seem unwell? No. He seemed pleased. Mrs. Ellery hesitated. He paid for Mrs. Crowley once. The inspector looked up. In here? Yes, she'd forgotten her purse. And when was that? Months ago. Did she thank him? Yes. Did he accept it? No. He corrected her order. The inspector nodded. Of course. He finished his tea and rose, leaving a coin that exceeded expectation. Mrs. Ellery watched him go, already preparing to repeat the conversation with adjustments. Outside, the green was occupied by the usual mid-morning activity, now sharpened by purpose. Inspector Purbright crossed toward the bench, where Miss Lowe and Mrs. Henley sat together, their heads inclined. "Inspector," Mrs. Henley said brightly, "have you had tea?" "Yes." "Sweet enough?" "Too sweet." She smiled. Arthur always said sugar, hid the truth. "And did he avoid it?" "No," Miss Lowe said. "He took one." The inspector sat. "Did either of you see him yesterday afternoon?" Mrs. Henley nodded. "He passed my gate at 3. At 3 exactly." "Yes." Miss Lowe frowned. "I thought it was earlier." Mrs. Henley waved this away. "Clocks differ." "They do," the inspector agreed. "Did he stop?" "No." "Did he speak?" "No." "Did he look back?" Miss Lowe hesitated. "Once." "At what?" "At Mrs. Crowley's house." "And how did that look?" "Final," Miss Lowe said, surprising herself. Inspector Purbright considered this. People often look final when they think something is finished. Mrs. Henley leaned closer. "Do you think he knew?" "Knew what?" "That he was going to die." The inspector smiled politely. "I think most people don't." He rose again, moving toward the vicarage. The vicar received him with careful warmth and poured tea with unnecessary ceremony. "Sugar?" he asked. "Yes," the inspector said. 2. The vicar's hand paused, then obeyed. "People are unsettled. They are. They're asking about the letter." Inspector Purbright met his gaze. "Which letter?" The vicar smiled thinly. "Arthur wrote many." "And you received them?" "Yes." "Did you write back?" "Yes." "Yesterday?" "No." "When then?" "Last week." "And what was the tone?" "Firm." "About?" "Boundaries." Again, the vicar sighed. "Arthur believed clarity was kindness." "And did you?" "I believed peace was." Inspector Purbright stirred his tea, watching the sugar dissolve. "Did Arthur ever bring you anything?" "Documents." "Did he ever bring tea?" The vicar smiled despite himself. "No." The inspector finished the cup. "I find sugar useful," he said. "It changes behavior." The vicar raised an eyebrow. "Does it? People notice." He stood and thanked him, leaving the vicar staring into his own cup as though expecting revelation. By afternoon, Inspector Purbright returned to Mrs. Crowley's house. She was in the kitchen preparing tea. "Sugar?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "One." She added it, watching carefully. "People think Arthur was helping me." "Yes, he wasn't. I know. They think I'm ungrateful. That follows." She handed him the cup. "Arthur disliked sugar." "Did he?" He said it disguised things. The inspector smiled faintly and tasted. "It does." She watched him. "You're doing this on purpose." "Yes." "Why?" "Because," he said gently, "people reveal their habits when something is changed." She nodded slowly. "Arthur changed things." "Yes." "And someone changed his tea." Inspector Purbright set the cup down. "Perhaps," she looked at the sugar bowl, "he would have noticed." "Yes," the inspector agreed. "Unless he was distracted." By what? By certainty. Silence settled between them, no longer civil but thoughtful. Outside, a door closed. Somewhere nearby, a kettle boiled. The inspector took another sip, letting the sweetness linger longer than he liked. And for the first time that day, he felt the shape of something forming, not a conclusion but a direction. Inspector Purbright noticed the door because it was not trying to be noticed. It stood between the vicarage hall and the study, neither fully open nor fully closed, offering passage without invitation. He paused before it, listening to the faint sounds of the house settling around its own order. The vicar had stepped away to answer the telephone, leaving the inspector alone with the tea things and the quiet. Purbright did not move immediately. He waited, as he often did, to see what the absence would do. From the study came the soft scrape of paper. The door shifted slightly, as if encouraged by a draft that did not exist. The inspector rose and approached, stopping just short of crossing the threshold. Inside, the room was neat to the point of intention. Papers were stacked rather than filed, arranged in a way that suggested frequent handling. On the desk lay an envelope, unsealed, its contents partly visible. Purbright did not touch it. He read what he could from where he stood. The vicar returned moments later, stopping short when he saw where the inspector was. "Ah," he said, too lightly. "I thought I'd closed that." "You did," Purbright replied. "Not fully." The vicar moved past him and closed the door with care. "Force of habit," he said. "Arthur always said doors should be decisive." "And did you agree?" "I agreed it was an opinion." They returned to their seats. The tea had cooled slightly, though not enough to discourage. The vicar took a sip and winced. "Too sweet," he said. "Yes," Purbright agreed. The vicar set the cup down. "You were asking about letters." "I was. Arthur wrote many, and received them." "Yes." "Did he keep them?" "Sometimes." "Did he ever show you one?" "No." "Did he ever ask for advice?" "Yes." "Did you give it?" The vicar hesitated. "I gave him perspective." "And did he accept it?" "He accepted that I had offered it." Inspector Purbright nodded. "Did he ever feel obliged to help you?" The vicar smiled thinly. Arthur believed obligation was the foundation of community, and kindness a byproduct. The inspector leaned back slightly. "Did you see him yesterday afternoon?" "No." "Did you expect him?" "No." "Did he expect you?" "I don't know." Silence followed, less comfortable than before. The vicar folded his hands, then unfolded them again. "He left a letter," the vicar said finally. "Yes, you've seen it?" "I've seen that it exists." It was pointed. "In what way?" "He believed something needed correcting, and did it." The vicar's mouth tightened. "That depends on who you ask." Inspector Purbright stood. "I should go." The vicar nodded, relief evident. "Of course." As the inspector reached the door, the vicar spoke again. "Inspector." "Yes." Arthur was not a cruel man. Purbright considered this. "Cruelty," he said, "is rarely intentional." He stepped outside, the door closing firmly behind him. The afternoon had shifted again. The village seemed to hold itself slightly differently, as though a decision were being rehearsed somewhere out of sight. Inspector Purbright walked toward the green, then turned instead down the lane leading past Mrs. Crowley's house. Her front door was open, too open. He paused at the gate. Mrs. Crowley stood in the hall, speaking to Mrs. Henley, who held her handbag with both hands. Their voices lowered when they saw him. "I won't stay," Mrs. Henley said quickly. "I only came to see if you were all right." "I am," Mrs. Crowley replied. "Thank you." Mrs. Henley smiled at the inspector. "We were just discussing Arthur." "I imagined," Purbright said. "He meant well," Mrs. Henley added, as if offering reassurance. Mrs. Crowley said nothing. "I'll leave you," Mrs. Henley said, moving past the inspector. She paused at the gate. "Do close the door," she added. "People talk." Inspector Purbright watched her go, then looked at Mrs. Crowley. "May I?" She nodded, stepping aside. Inside, the hall felt exposed. The door had been open longer than necessary. "You left it open," he said. "Yes." "Why?" She hesitated. "I thought someone might come back." "Who?" She shook her head. "No one." He closed the door gently. "Arthur left things open," he said. "Yes." "Did he ever stay longer than invited?" "Yes." "And did you ever ask him to leave?" "No." "Why not?" "Because he was already leaving." Inspector Purbright nodded, and that felt kinder. She looked at him sharply. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," he said gently, "that doors left open invite misunderstandings." She folded her arms. "Arthur didn't misunderstand." "No," Purbright agreed. He assumed. They stood in the hall, the door now firmly closed, the house settling around its boundaries. "He came early," she said suddenly. "Who?" "Arthur." "Earlier than he admitted." "At what time?" "Before 3. "How much before?" "Enough." Inspector Purbright felt the direction sharpen. "Did he speak to anyone?" "I don't know." "Did he open the door himself?" "Yes." "And did he close it?" She hesitated. "I don't remember." The inspector smiled faintly. "That's all right. Doors remember for us." Outside, footsteps passed, slowed, then continued. The inspector took up his hat. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For leaving it open," he replied. She watched him go. The door closed now, properly this time, the afternoon pressing against it without success. The weather changed its mind just after midday, which several people later cited as significant. A thin rain began without conviction, falling lightly enough to be denied but persistently enough to alter behavior. Umbrellas appeared, then vanished again, Coats were fetched and regretted. The village adjusted, and in doing so created opportunity for misunderstanding. Inspector Purbright observed this from the edge of the green, where he had stopped not from purpose but from habit. Weather, he had learned, encouraged honesty by accident. People excused themselves differently under it. Mrs. Dalrymple approached him with an umbrella that did not quite cover either of them. Awful timing, she said. For what, he asked. For everything. She gestured vaguely toward the village. People were expecting clarity, and instead, rain. He nodded. It complicates things. It always does, she agreed. Arthur hated rain. Did he? Yes, said it made people careless. Inspector Purbright smiled faintly. It can. They walked a short distance together, neither matching the other's pace. You saw him yesterday, he said. Yes. When? Earlier than most. How much earlier? She hesitated. Before 3. That seems to be a popular estimate. She frowned. He came by my gate around 1:45. And did he stop? No. Did he speak? No. Did he look wet? She considered. No. The inspector glanced at the sky. It hadn't started yet. No, she said. That came later. They parted with mutual politeness. Purbright continued on, noting the way people now lingered under eaves, conversations stretching to accommodate shelter. Near the post office, Miss Lowe stood waiting, umbrella closed despite the drizzle. You're watching, she said. Yes, everyone is. And what are they seeing? She smiled thinly. Whatever suits. Did Arthur Bellamy suit anyone? She thought. He suited himself. Did you see him yesterday? Yes. When? Just before 3. Before or after the rain? Before. Was he in a hurry? No. He was deliberate. Toward where? She glanced toward Mrs. Crowley's house. There. Did he carry anything? His notebook. Did he write? I didn't see. Inspector Purbright nodded and moved on. The rain increased slightly, enough now to justify complaint. At the cafe, Mrs. Ellery wiped the counter with unnecessary vigor. People are saying the rain hid something, she said. Did it? It hid Arthur's footsteps. The inspector raised an eyebrow. Were they worth hiding? He walked the long way round, she said. When? Yesterday. What time? Just before 3. And why do you think that? Because I saw him pass the window twice. That suggests indecision. No, she said. It suggests avoidance. Avoidance of what? She leaned closer. Of being seen. Inspector Purbright considered this. By whom? By Mrs. Crowley. He nodded slowly. Or by everyone else? She hesitated. Perhaps. He thanked her and stepped back into the rain. The village clock chimed the hour, dampened by the weather but still insistent. At Mrs. Crowley's gate, he paused. The path was darker with moisture. Footprints softened into suggestion. He did not look for evidence. He looked for habit. She answered the door promptly. It's raining, she said. Yes. I thought you might come back. Why? Because the weather changed. Inspector Purbright smiled faintly. People do. They stood in the doorway, the rain blurring the edges of the world beyond. Arthur disliked rain, she said, so I'm told. He said it excused lateness, and did it. Sometimes. Did he arrive late yesterday? No. Early? Yes. How early? She hesitated. Before 3. How much before? Enough to matter. And what did he do? He waited. Where? In the sitting room. Did he write? Yes. In his notebook? Yes. Before tea? Yes. Inspector Purbright nodded, the picture adjusting itself. Did he seem distracted? No. Certain. About what? She looked away. About me. The rain intensified, tapping against the glass with quiet insistence. People think the weather confused things, she said. Did it? It always does, she replied. It makes small actions look accidental. And were they? She met his gaze. No. The inspector stepped back, letting the rain touch his coat. Thank you, he said. For what? For noticing. As he walked away, the rain eased, as though having achieved its purpose. Behind him, Mrs. Crowley closed the door, the sound firm, deliberate. The village resumed its movement, conversations restarting with adjusted confidence. Somewhere between dry and wet, early and late, deliberate and mistaken, a version of events was settling into place, one that would soon require correction. Inspector Purbright returned to the vicarage later that afternoon, When the rain had finished pretending to matter, and the light had taken on the color of considered judgment, the house received him politely. It always did. Houses, like their occupants, had habits. The vicar met him in the hall, hands already folded, expression arranged for listening rather than disclosure. "Inspector," he said, "I wondered if you might come again." "I imagine you did," Purbright replied. They moved into the sitting room this time, not the study. The choice was deliberate and therefore informative. The tea arrived quickly, unsweetened. The inspector noticed. "You don't take sugar," the vicar said. "Not today," Purbright replied. "I've had enough." The vicar smiled faintly and sat. "I understand matters are becoming complicated. They often do when everyone agrees too quickly." The vicar inclined his head. "People wish to be helpful." "Yes," Purbright said. "So did Arthur Bellamy." A silence followed, measured and careful. The vicar looked at his hands, then at the inspector. Arthur was persistent. "So I've heard. He believed correction was a form of service. And did you?" The vicar paused. "I believed restraint was." "Did Arthur share that belief?" "No." Inspector Purbright leaned back slightly. "You and Mr. Bellamy disagreed." "Yes." "Frequently?" "Yes." "Publicly?" "Occasionally." "Privately?" "More so." The vicar exhaled slowly. "Arthur wrote to me the day before he died." "I know. He intended to bring the letter himself." "Did he say so?" "He implied it." "And what did the letter say?" The vicar hesitated. "It accused me of negligence." "In what respect?" "In failing to act." "On what?" "On matters he considered urgent." Inspector Purbright nodded. "And did you intend to act?" "I intended to respond." "Did you?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I did not agree." Silence returned, less comfortable than before. Outside, footsteps passed the window, slowed, then moved on. "Did Arthur threaten you?" the inspector asked. The vicar looked up sharply. "No." "Did he pressure you?" "Yes." "In what way?" "He implied consequences." "What kind?" "Social." "Embarrassment?" "Yes." Inspector Purbright smiled faintly. He had a gift for that. The vicar's mouth tightened. "Arthur believed the parish required supervision." "And you?" "I believed it required trust." "Did Arthur trust you?" "No." "And did that trouble him?" "Yes." Another pause. The inspector watched the vicar carefully, noting not what he said, but what he avoided. "Did Arthur mention Mrs. Crowley?" Purbright asked. The vicar's eyes flickered. "He mentioned many people." "Did he mention her recently?" "Yes." "In what context?" "He believed she was vulnerable." "In what way?" "She lived alone. And she was, in his view, insufficiently guided." Inspector Purbright nodded. "And did you agree?" "No." "Did you tell him so?" "Yes." "And how did he take that?" "He said I was abdicating responsibility." The inspector leaned forward slightly. "Did Arthur intend to intervene?" The vicar hesitated. "He believed intervention was already underway." "In what form?" "He had written to her." "I know." "And did you know the contents?" "No." "But you guessed?" "Yes." "And what did you think?" "I thought it unwise." "Why?" "Because Arthur mistook persistence for permission." Inspector Purbright allowed the words to settle. "Did you warn Mrs. Crowley?" "No." "Why not?" The vicar folded his hands again, more tightly this time. "Because I did not think Arthur would go so far." "So far as what?" "So far as to insist." "Did he?" "Yes." "Did you know when?" "No." "But you suspected?" "Yes." The inspector nodded slowly. "What did Arthur not say to you?" The vicar looked startled. "I'm not sure I understand. What did he avoid?" The vicar considered this, then spoke carefully. "He did not say he would stop." Inspector Purbright stood. "Thank you." The vicar rose as well, uneasy. "Inspector." "Yes?" "I did not wish him harm." "I know," Purbright said gently. "You wished him restraint." The vicar nodded. Relief mingled with something else. "Yes." Inspector Purbright moved toward the door. "People often confuse silence with permission," he said. The vicar did not reply. Outside, the light had shifted again, shadows lengthening across the path. The inspector paused at the gate, looking back once. The vicar stood in the doorway, watching, his expression composed but unfinished. As Purbright walked away, he considered not what the vicar had told him, but what he had assumed would go without saying. In villages, assumptions were powerful things. They filled gaps, justified action, and excused delay. Arthur Bellamy had relied on them. Someone else had relied on him. The inspector felt the shape of the conclusion drawing nearer, not through evidence, but through omission. What the vicar had not said weighed more than what he had, and it pointed, quietly but firmly, toward a final civil understanding that would soon have to be spoken aloud. Inspector Purbright did not summon anyone. He waited instead, and the village, having reached the limit of its own certainty, came to him. By late afternoon, people had begun to look relieved at the prospect of being told what they already suspected, provided it arrived with authority and did not require embarrassment. Mrs. Crowley received them in her sitting room. The chair where Arthur Bellamy had died remained empty, its absence now part of the arrangement. The tea was poured, plain and unadorned. Sugar was offered and declined. Mrs. Dalrymple sat nearest the window, upright with anticipation. Miss Lowe occupied the sofa's edge. Mr. Graves stood, as if prepared to leave at short notice. The vicar arrived last, removing his hat and holding it rather than setting it down. Inspector Purbright waited until the tea had cooled slightly. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I won't take long." Mrs. Dalrymple nodded. "We've all been saying, yes," Purbright said gently. "You have." Silence followed, not hostile, but expectant. "Arthur Bellamy did not die by accident," the inspector continued, "nor did he die by malice." The vicar looked up. "Then how?" "He died by certainty," Purbright replied. "His own, and someone else's." Mrs. Crowley folded her hands. "I never wished him harm." "I know," the inspector said, "and he never believed you did." Mr. Graves frowned. "Then who?" "No one," Purbright said. "Not in the way you mean." They shifted, dissatisfied. "Arthur believed it was his responsibility to intervene," Purbright went on. "He wrote, he advised, he insisted. He believed persistence was kindness, and that kindness excused intrusion." Miss Lowe nodded slowly. "That sounds like him." "He believed Mrs. Crowley required guidance," the inspector said. "He came early that afternoon to ensure he had time to explain himself fully." Mrs. Crowley closed her eyes briefly. "He brought his notebook," Purbright continued. "He wrote before tea. He had already decided what must be done." Mrs. Dalrymple leaned forward. "But the poison?" "Yes," Purbright said. "Arthur disliked sugar. He believed it disguised things. He took his tea plain." The vicar's expression tightened. "The tea that afternoon was prepared as usual," Purbright said. "No one added anything. Arthur, however, had brought something himself." Miss Henley, who had been hovering near the door, gasped softly. "Why would he?" "Because he believed he knew best," the inspector replied. "Arthur had been taking a tincture, prepared by himself, intended to calm agitation. He mentioned it to the doctor once. In passing, Dr. Fenwick, seated quietly, nodded. He said it helped him focus. It contained a compound safe in small doses, Purbright said. Arthur adjusted it. He believed moderation was for others. The room absorbed this. He took it with his tea, Purbright continued. Earlier than usual, he had not eaten. The effect was immediate. Mrs. Dalrymple frowned. "But why here?" "Because he wished to be persuasive," Purbright said, "and because Mrs. Crowley represented to him unfinished business." Mrs. Crowley opened her eyes. "He meant to help." "Yes," Purbright agreed. "He always did." The vicar spoke quietly. "And the letter?" "Arthur intended to insist," the inspector said. "He expected agreement." Mrs. Crowley's voice was steady. "I was considering my reply." "Yes," Purbright said, "and Arthur mistook consideration for permission." Silence settled, heavy but not shocked. "So no one poisoned him," Mr. Graves said slowly. "No," Purbright replied. "He poisoned himself, unintentionally, through certainty." Mrs. Dalrymple exhaled. "That will disappoint some." "Yes," the inspector said. "It often does." The vicar looked down. "I should have intervened." "You did," Purbright said. "You withheld agreement." The vicar nodded, accepting that without relief. Mrs. Crowley looked around the room. "Will they believe this?" "They will," Purbright said, "because it allows them to be right without being responsible." A faint smile passed between Miss Lowe and Mrs. Dalrymple, unacknowledged. Inspector Purbright stood. "Arthur Bellamy will be remembered as helpful," he said, "and thorough. That will suit him. Mrs. Crowley rose as well. And me? You will be remembered as patient, he replied. That will suffice. They moved toward the door together. Outside, the village waited, already adjusting its story. Inspector Purbright put on his hat. There will be no apology, Mrs. Crowley said quietly. No, Purbright agreed. Only agreement. She nodded, and that was enough. The village did not change immediately. It rarely did. Hatherley Green preferred to absorb conclusions slowly, allowing them to soften at the edges before accepting them as memory. By the following afternoon, however, the rhythm had shifted. Conversations resumed their former length. Doors were closed with their usual care. The green returned to being simply a green, not a reference point. Inspector Purbright walked through it once more before leaving. He did so without urgency, his hat in his hand, his pace unremarkable. People noticed him less now, which he took as a sign of success. Mrs. Dalrymple passed him near the bench and nodded. Such a shame, she said. Yes, he replied. But not a mystery, she added. No, Purbright agreed. Not anymore. She seemed satisfied with that and moved on, already adjusting the story for future retelling. It would be shortened, he suspected, and improved. At the post office, Mrs. Henley spoke with deliberate cheer. It was all very unfortunate, she said. But at least there was no wickedness. Wickedness is tiring, the inspector said. She smiled, uncertain whether this was agreement or dismissal. He continued on toward Mrs. Crowley's house, where the door was closed and the curtains half drawn. He knocked once. She answered promptly, as she always had. I thought you might come, she said. Yes, she stepped aside, and he entered, the sitting room restored to its earlier order. The chair had been moved slightly, no longer facing the table directly. The tea service sat unused. They'll settle on it now, she said. Their version, yes, and it will be kind to Arthur. It will. She sat, folding her hands. He would have liked that. Yes, Purbright said. He liked being right. And now he is, she said. The inspector smiled faintly. In a way. They sat in silence for a moment, the house no longer holding its breath. Outside a cart passed, its sound ordinary again. You said he died by certainty, she said. Yes, and by mine as well. He considered this. No, by his expectation of yours. She nodded slowly. I was going to refuse. I know, he never considered that. No, she looked at the table. He believed consideration was agreement. Yes, and patience permission. Yes, another pause, this one easier. What will you write? She asked. The truth, Purbright replied, in a way people can live with. She smiled. That's always the trick. He stood. One afternoon, he said, misunderstood by many. And now, she asked. Properly understood, he replied. She rose as well, and walked him to the door. Outside the light had softened, no longer judgmental, merely present. Will you take tea? She asked. No, he said. Not today, she nodded, accepting that without offense. Inspector Purbright walked back toward his car, aware that the village was already rearranging its sympathies, its recollections aligning with comfort rather than accuracy. Arthur Bellamy would be remembered as helpful, persistent, perhaps tiresome. Mrs. Crowley would be remembered as patient. The vicar would be remembered as restrained. That would be enough. As he reached the green, Miss Lowe called to him. Inspector, yes? Was there really nothing anyone could have done? He considered the question, looking at the bench, the path, the ordinary afternoon. People did what they always do, he said. They assumed. She nodded. That's what I thought. He smiled faintly and continued on. The car started without complaint. As he drove away, the village receded, its certainty settling back into habit. The afternoon had ended as it began, with tea prepared, opinions offered, and doors opened or closed according to preference. Arthur Bellamy had believed himself indispensable. He had been mistaken. The village would continue without him, improved only by the absence of his corrections. Inspector Purbright did not think this unkind. It was simply accurate. At the edge of the lane he paused once, looking back. Hatherley Green lay quiet, respectable, and entirely convinced it had understood what had happened. In that it was not entirely wrong. He drove on, satisfied that no confrontation had been required, no accusation spoken aloud, The truth had arrived through agreement, not apology, and that, he reflected, was often the only way it was allowed to stay.